Welcome to the Raw Spotlight podcast, where we feature inspiring leaders in the B2B space and share their unique stories. Let's get started with the show.
Hi, I'm Victor Huynh, the host of this show, where we feature leaders from B2B businesses, niche markets, large-scale brands, local businesses, and public sector entities to share their innovative strategies and inspiring success stories. This episode is brought to you by Ready Artwork, where we deliver uniquely tailored B2B digital marketing services to facilitate long-term growth of your business. At Ready Artwork, we combine data-driven insights and innovative design to help your business thrive in the digital age, from SEO to digital advertising to web development and email marketing. We have the experts who help companies uncover growth in unexplored and extraordinary ways. To learn more, visit readyartwork.com. Let Ready Artwork discover your full potential. I have Chad here from Rise25, who has done thousands of interviews with successful entrepreneurs and CEOs. And we have flipped the script today. He will be interviewing me. Chad, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much, Victor. Great to be here. I appreciate you having me. How are you?
Good.
Good. I'm looking forward to talking with you all about Ready Artwork and kind of all the things that you're working on, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
As we get going here, I know this is the first podcast episode that you have recorded, so we'll take this opportunity to get to know you a little bit more. If you could just kind of tell me about your background, especially maybe the background that you had before you started Ready Artwork, which was 20 plus years ago, but kind of the beginning of your career.
The beginning of my career actually started really early. I come from an immigrant family. I was the first in my family to be born here in San Diego, California, and it was not an easy start. So I started working when I was legally able to work. I think the work permit was like around 16 years old. And I did anything I could get my hands on, from tutoring to retail. I carried jobs through high school, through college. In college, the last job I ended with was working at a bank where it was bilingual in Mandarin, Cantonese, English, Spanish, all kinds of languages involved in our local community. And then because I studied graphic design, I landed a job that went from part-time to full-time right after college as a quote-unquote marketing manager. So using my design skills, I basically did a little bit of everything from photography. And this is when digital photography just started, when they, like a 6 megapixel camera was a big deal, SLR.
Yeah.
And, I did the product photo shoots. I arranged the trade shows. I ran the ads and produced them. And then slowly started developing an actual small department for a furniture company. So that was the first marketing job that I had, where I was able to kind of exercise my skills as a marketer. And that was before we started, the beginning stages of what Ready Artwork is today.
Yeah. So, so you kind of really got your career rolling doing that. How did you, what inspired you to start Ready Artwork then in 2003?
Well, I grew up in a family that was very entrepreneurial, like a lot of immigrant families are.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really have a ton of education. So a lot of their first reaction is just to go into some kind of a small business. And so growing up in that environment, I've always been comfortable with the idea versus people that, they have a whole family, a whole network of people that have regular jobs and careers, their go-to. So in a way, I was kind of influenced by my upbringing. The other was really, we started taking on like freelance projects, and clients came back. So it was just more out of a reaction from that, where we started piling up a lot of freelance projects. and repeat customers.
What now that Ready Artwork has been going for a couple decades, what attracts prospective clients to Ready Artwork as opposed to maybe a competitive firm?
I think the biggest thing is that we're constantly evolving and improving ourselves. So sometimes to a fault, right? We're trying to find that balance between evolution and process. You have to have some kind of stability for process, but at the same time, digital marketing specifically moves so fast that if you take your eyes off of it, you fall behind. So one of the biggest things is that we're constantly evolving, from where we were to where we are today.
I'm sure since you started doing design, and especially since you started your own firm, the digital marketing landscape it was probably nothing like it was back then. It's changed 15 times over. What would you say are the most significant ways in which it's changed?
Well, first off, we were just having an internal conversation about that. Our 20th anniversary is coming up, and digital marketing was almost non-existent back in the day, unless you want to define like television as
Hmm.
as digital marketing, right? So from non-existence to today, where it is today, it's leaps and bounds, and also the accessibility for smaller businesses. Compared to when it just started, it was really just the top big companies that had access to these things, right? Today, the playing field is relatively flat compared to what it used to be, especially with all the SaaS model software and strategies out that are available today.
Interesting. So you mentioned accessibility. Can you explain the importance of ADA web accessibility and how it impacts businesses?
Oh, okay. That's a different type of accessibility, but um, it's kind of we've experienced that really early on, as we started working with some government projects. So it wasn't mainstream yet at the time. So as you go through some of the RFPs for government websites, they do have certain requirements, and we got in really, really early before ADA devolved to what it is today. It's a fairly new thing. I think it was Bush Senior that implemented the Americans with Disability Act, and that was supposed to be an overarching umbrella to kind of give equal access to public spaces to people with disabilities. And that later on evolved and got interpreted to a point where websites or the World Wide Web is also a public place. Therefore, the Americans with Disabilities Act also applies there. And, it's kind of all over news these days. But, the intention was really to create a fair and accessible space for everybody as equally as possible. Just like how wheelchairs going up a ramp or accessing a public space. So why is it important? So there are two things, right? Number one, from a human compassion angle, right? We do want to make sure that people are treated as fairly as possible. So it's the right thing to do. Number two is that there are consequences, right? So there've been a number of high profile lawsuits over the years where the courts awarded a lot of money. But you also have to strike a balance because a lot of small businesses are not aware or can't afford these lawsuits that are happening. So that's the really big thing that we need to balance, is between the livelihood of the businesses themselves and giving access to as many people as possible. So for the most part, web ADA accessibility addresses a lot of common issues, such as text readability. So one example is people would embed text into images because formatting is a little bit tough when it comes to building a small website. So they'll just slap an image into it and call it a day. But what happens is when these there are actual readers, digital readers, that people with visual impairments would use to read the text on a website. And when it's flattened into an image like that, it would not be able to read that text, right? That's just one example. The others would be things like font size, even contrast issues, right? Especially with, some people don't think about it. There's a lot of people that are colorblind. So if you use certain color combinations or certain contrast levels, they become inaccessible to people with that disability, right? Some people with physical disabilities where they might not be able to use a mouse, right? And maybe be able to press one button on the keyboard. So a common test is, are you able to hit the tab button on your keyboard and get it to navigate throughout the website versus having to use a mouse? So there's a couple of different angles that that you want to run through to make sure that it's as accessible as possible. The other thing is that there is also a huge industry that kind of sprouted out of this whole movement with plug-in solutions or software solutions. Not that all of them are bad, but a lot of them are not really built with the intent of the first thing I talked about, like basically doing the right thing and giving access to people. But it actually is more designed with the intent to trick the system so that they can mitigate the risk of lawsuits. So typically how the lawsuits come about is, some person, some entity, or some law group will use a software scanner that would go out and crawl different websites and then give it a grade, right? If you pass or fail the grade, then you might become a candidate or you might get passed up. So these scanners will, go through their checklist of scanning a website and then figure out who's a good candidate to sue. So these software solutions kind of counteract that by creating an extra layer between the website and the scanners that would then trick them and go, hey, we're scripting and we're enlarging, we're allowing these tools to happen. So then that hopefully they get bypassed. But unfortunately, a lot of times this extra layer creates a lot more complexities for the actual disabled person to access the information they want. As a non-disabled person, seeing that little button and clicking on it and saying, well, it enlarges things or it creates certain tags, it makes sense to us. But for a disabled person to use that sometimes is more complicated than actually just building it properly with proper ADA.
Okay. Well, hey, that's definitely a different type of accessibility than you were originally talking about.
Yeah.
But that's very good to know. Very, very, very informative, and that's what makes you a thought leader. So, more big picture stuff here.
Yeah.
What in terms of running a digital marketing agency, is there kind of a challenge that you find yourself constantly running up against?
Challenge. Yes, because, as I mentioned earlier, um, the landscape changes a lot, right? Um, no one told me at the beginning that, starting an agency would not just be designing nice things at the very beginning, right?
Mhm.
You had to learn about an organization. You had to learn accounting. You need to know tax law. You need to know HR. And we're in California, so HR is a really big issue, right, for business owners.
Mhm.
So having to get familiar with all that, um, cash flow, marketing, self marketing. There are there are so many elements. But that's also why we're able to relate to a lot of our clients, the understanding all those business concerns. So I wouldn't say that there is one specific major issue that we come across, but if it's marketing related, then it's obviously the pace of how fast things move and how new things come up and things get outdated really quickly. Um, on the organization side, it's just really constantly being a student, right? in the business sense, learning things that we didn't know about. So the more I like to say this, the more I learn or the more I know, the more I realize I don't know. So
Sure.
um, that's just the biggest part, is just constantly being a student and being humble about it.
How much are the strategies that you use for your clients? How much are those data driven? And then how do you balance, kind of that data driven strategy with creativity?
Oh yeah. So um, a lot of times the data will surprise us, right? We can go in and we can use the client's experience, we could use our past experience, but that's usually just the starting point. Once you create that, and you put all the data collection pieces in place, then the data will start telling a story. So a lot of it is, how do we interpret the data, what it means, and how can it either affirm our suspicions or kind of disprove them, right? So, and a lot of times the data piece is also good for when you have multiple stakeholders where there's a dispute or they have a gridlock on decisions. So a lot of times the data will come in and go, hey, you know, this is unbiased. This is actually data that's telling us that the audience prefers this over that, or we're getting more results here versus there, right? The creative piece is actually the piece that we use for testing. So in data collection, you really have to do a lot of what we call A/B testing in the industry. You come up with a lot of different creative ideas, and then you tie it into your data strategy so that usually the more creative piece that connects better with the audience will perform better. And sometimes it surprises us too. Sometimes something really ugly ends up performing, right? So it keeps our creative side in check, if you will. There's some checks and balances because there's such a thing as being too creative, where people are just completely lost, right? So it's constantly a battle between the two, left brain, right brain, if you will, right? You need the creativity for branding, for connection. You need a data piece to kind of make sure everyone's on the right page, so that you don't just go off on a creative tangent. Yeah.
You're located in Monrovia, California. Where is that? Where in California is that?
That's Southern California, Los Angeles County. Los Angeles County is huge, though. It's bigger than some countries. So for those of you that are more aware, we're about 15 minutes east of downtown Los Angeles if there is no traffic, about an hour with traffic.
How often is there no traffic?
Yeah, off hours, as long as it's not rush hours,
Okay.
And then those that are even more familiar with LA, then we're just like a couple cities over from Pasadena. So the Rose Bowl, right?
Okay.
So we're
Yeah.
really close there. Yeah.
Yeah, great. So you have created something called the Southern California Small Business Network. What is that, and what motivated you to create it?
It was a networking group from many years ago, when I was really actively networking. And the idea really came from a group of friends that says, hey, there are some chambers and there are some other networking groups, but we really want to create something that's a little bit more casual. So the whole premise was, location based and small business, or just business professionals, if you will. So how we started was, we started the Facebook group, and I think it was like 20 of my professional friends that I thought would be a good fit. And I just sent a message out and go, hey, please add people that you personally know that would find this group beneficial, right? So, and it just grew organically from there. So we don't take random strangers that put in requests. So the prerequisite would just be, you have to be vetted by an existing member, and it started with 20 members, and it grew to over 1,000, I believe. These days we're not as active as we used to be. So we used to do a lot more events and a lot of Q&A type of stuff. But it was really active, for quite a few years.
So you were raised in an entrepreneurial environment. You have a design background. Those two things obviously greatly influence your work. You've also been the president of the Monrovia Chamber of Commerce. How has that kind of influenced your business approach?
Yeah, that gave me insight into our community, and really, Monrovia is a very stereotypical American city. I think we even won the award for All American City for quite a few years. Um, so being involved in that really kind of opened my eyes to a lot of different local businesses that I normally wouldn't have access to. Like, we don't have a lot of, for example, restaurant clients, right? We have a couple here and there, but that's not really our niche. Um, and real estate agents, insurance people, and then also some of the more established local businesses. Um, Being able to kind of see the things that people care about. One of the big things that I was really proud to kind of be a part of was my presidency was right in the middle of COVID. So we were shut down. And all the restaurants were scrambling to figure out what to do next. So we partnered with a group of business leaders, and we put together a campaign called Operation Save Our Restaurants. So people actually put money in and offered vouchers that then they can go spend at these restaurants, our local restaurants. And we got, I think, quite a few restaurants sign up to the program, and then they got reimbursed every time they brought the ticket into the group, and they kind of took the money out. And it was a really, really fast turnaround, for a campaign like this, because we knew every day that went by, these people were, suffering. People didn't have jobs, businesses were getting shut down because, right, we're in the middle of COVID. So that was one of the campaigns that, really connected me with the community, and we were able to kind of make a difference. I think that's the big thing, right? Being part of an organization that actually makes differences.
Yeah, that's great. That's a good story. Hey, so it's been more than 20 years that you have been running Ready Artwork. Is there like a really big lesson that you learned that maybe you would never have learned if you hadn't been running Ready Artwork, if you had just been an employee or something?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is that it's it's never the end, no matter how bad things get. Because as you can imagine, running an organization for 20 years, you have your ups and downs. There are going to be good times, but there are going to be horrible, horrible times that, at the time can feel like the end. But as time goes on, it kind of works itself out. I remember like early on, um, this was over a decade ago. There was some like mistake in the IRS filings, and they basically went into our bank account and leaned like $30,000, just pulled it out. And we were much smaller back then, so we couldn't even make payroll because IRS just went in and just took our money, and it ended up being a mistake. We got our money back, but I think it was like 6 months later.
Hmm.
So we had to scramble and then find money to pay our team, because one thing we're proud of is we never missed a payroll check for in the last 20 years. But things like that will
Yeah.
happen, and they will continue to happen. So you kind of you build like this strength to know that things will always be better.
Given that kind of experience as an entrepreneur, the hopefully it's not a roller coaster, but the natural ups and downs that come with it. Does that make you kind of maybe more empathetic with your clients than you might be if you hadn't been an entrepreneur yourself?
For sure, 100%. I think that's the one thing, is the relatability to clients as we're talking. When they feel like you get me, you understand the culture, you understand what running a business is like. I think that goes a long way when we're working with clients.
I think you listed a few of the languages that you speak, or all the languages that you speak. How many languages do you speak?
Um, I would like fluent, like somewhat fluent. Uh, English, Mandarin, Cantonese. There's another, like my parents' like mother tongue. It's not really used mainstream, so I don't usually count it. I've taken many years of Spanish, although I don't use it enough to be fluent. I know a couple
Mhm.
words here or there.
Mhm.
Um, so that that actually, aside from the language skills itself, I think there's also a cultural understanding of certain cultures and appreciation of different cultures. I think that comes into a lot of it comes into play when we're thinking about marketing strategies, and how that it's not always one size fit all. Sometimes you really have to think about things from a cultural standpoint and from different angles other than what we see on mainstream.
What is your approach to staying updated with the latest digital marketing trends?
Um, Podcast, ebooks, um, conferences, right? Joining different groups, as um, as I mature in my career. Um, there's a lot more emphasis and we see a lot more value in that. We joined a mastermind for agencies. We're paying for consultants, we're paying for knowledge, just because, when we were a lot younger, we always thought about, okay, well, how much should we be spending on things? And we try to do things like the easy way or try to get free information. But at the end of the day, when someone has valuable information, we've gotten to a point where we can afford a little bit of that. So we try to spend what we can in terms of knowledge and upgrading ourselves and the team.
Has there been a time where a client has come to you and maybe they were facing a significant challenge or something like that, and working with Ready Artwork helped them overcome it? And if so, can you share that story with us?
Yeah. One of our clients, they have a practice in healthcare, and they are not the actual end healthcare provider, right? They're more on the back end, back office billing, and there was a market confusion, right? Even when I first heard of them, I looked through their website and I looked at their online reviews, and everything kind of pointed to a actual medical care center, right? I was like, wow, they have a lot of locations and they have a lot of reviews. It wasn't until I spoke to them and started realizing that no, they're actually B2B, and they don't service the actual patients in the medical world. Their customers are actually the practitioners themselves. So over the last 2 years, what we've been helping them with is really realigning the vision, attracting the right customer, putting out the right messaging, and then also, changing the public narrative in terms of on the review side, on the website, on their ad strategy, on their email strategy, to really get people to understand that this is who we are and this is who we service. Although on the public end, that's also made a lot more simple to understand through just the digital domain, right? Everything we do, changing up the strategy. That was one of the biggest changes. And now, we're running multiple successful campaigns, and, they're attracting the right customers, because, a lot of people were just going there and not understanding what are you, or what are you offering, right? So on a high level, it seems like pretty straightforward, but operationally, when you're in it, it's really hard to get out of it, because that's how we kind of built our business brick by brick, and it just evolved that way. And to come in from as an outsider perspective and go, hey, these are actually your big problems, your big picture problems. And it wasn't something we solved overnight. We're still working with this client, but it's taken over 2 years to get to where we are, to start seeing some traction and, filling up their pipeline with the right customers.
Very nice. So this is as I mentioned, this is your first podcast episode. What made you decide to start a podcast, and what are you most looking forward to about it?
Okay, so it's something I always tell my team also, is that you're not growing when you're comfortable. Podcast is something we talked about for years, and I've always kind of shied away from it, just because, like a lot of even our clients, right? I tell them, hey, you need to get in front of camera, you need to start a podcast, or you need to just be more visible. And I really have to start practicing what I preach. So that's one big motivator is, number one is getting outside of my comfort zone and learning. You don't learn if you don't start. So starting the podcast. And then the other thing is really pushing, hopefully our clients can hear this and see this. They'll probably laugh, if they hear this part. But I do, like, during our meetings, I always tell them, hey, you need to get in front of the camera, and you need to get your message out. You need to start telling your story. And this is here we're doing it. And, that's one of the big drivers.
Okay, great. So far, so good. Hey, Victor, it was my pleasure, my privilege to be part of the first podcast with you. Thanks so much for having me today.
Thank you, Chad.
So long, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Raw Spotlight Podcast. We'll see you again next time. And be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.